In the morning on the day of her son's wedding, our driver said, "Lie down on the back seat and cover yourself with the blanket. You need to hear this." I wanted to object, but he begged. "Trust me." Half an hour later, I heard something while we were still at the start. Share in the comments from which country you're watching this. Every time I'm amazed by our geography. Enjoy listening. The June fog hadn't yet released Vladivostok, and the golden bridge behind the window of the mansion on Gershel Street dissolved in the milky haze, only with outlines like a sketch by an artist who changed his mind about finishing the painting. Zinaida Stepanovna stood in front of the mirror in the bedroom, holding up a hanger with a dress, the very one she had chosen 3 months ago in a boutique on Svetlanskaya Street, when everything seemed right and happy, when the saleswoman clucked her tongue in admiration, and Bogdan, who popped in for a minute, said, "Mom, you'll be the most beautiful." An elegant outfit for the mother of the groom. She should have felt joy, a light excitement, perhaps tears of tenderness, all that is expected of a woman giving her son to another woman. Instead, something heavy and unformed stirred in her chest, similar to a premonition of trouble that couldn't be driven away or explained. 3 years ago, when Leonid died of a massive heart attack right in his office with a view of the Golden Horn Bay, leaving her a chain of restaurants, a Pacific logistics company, and commercial real estate worth 700 million, Zinaida Stepanovna learned to turn grief into fuel. While she checked warehouses in the port, negotiated with crab suppliers, and dealt with container shipments, she had no time to sink. Bogdan sank for both of them. Her boy, her son, who had lost not just a father but a life reference point, a moral compass, a source of paternal wisdom that no maternal love could replace. He walked like a shadow for a whole year after the funeral, hardly ate, didn't meet friends, sat for hours in his father's office sorting through his papers as if searching for answers to questions he hadn't had time to ask. Zinaida Stepanovna saw that emptiness in his eyes, that gaping need for attachment, for someone to fill the space freed after Leonid's departure. But she was too busy saving the business to help her son humanely. And then Milena appeared. A charity auction for a fund helping children with oncology. Zinaida Stepanovna still remembered that evening in the smallest details, though 2 years had passed. Bogdan came home a different person. For the first time in many months, his eyes shone, he spoke breathlessly, waved his arms, smiled with that boyish smile that Zinaida Stepanovna no longer hoped to see. "Mom, I met her. She moved from Moscow, imagine, for a quiet life by the sea. She does charity work. She understands me." He couldn't stop, and Zinaida Stepanovna listened, feeling both joy for her son and a strange chill in the pit of her stomach. Too perfect, too timely, too much like a fairy tale. A week later, Bogdan brought Milena to the office on Gershel. Beautiful, educated, with polished manners and a soft voice. She said all the right words, expressed condolences for the death of Leonid Markovich, admired the view of the bay. But her gaze, Zinaida Stepanovna noticed it immediately, wandered over the expensive furnishings with a particular appraising expression, lingering on works of art, antique clocks, on that very view from the window which was worth half the price of this office. Milena asked questions, many questions, concrete and specific. How many restaurants in the chain, how the logistics management is arranged, in whose name the property is registered, if they're business partners. This went beyond the usual curiosity of a bride wanting to know the groom's family, and Zinaida Stepanovna felt it with her whole being. They checked the documents. Zinaida Stepanovna insisted on it, though Bogdan was offended and called her paranoid. Work certificate from a large Moscow company, extract from her apartment in the capital. Everything looked convincing, everything confirmed the legend of a well-off woman who decided to swap the capital's hustle for the sea breeze of Vladivostok. And Zinaida Stepanovna kept silent, convincing herself that she just didn't want to become that kind of mother-in-law, that her suspicion was merely jealousy of an aging mother not ready to share her son with another woman. Why she chose the comfort of a short-term world instead of the painful truth, she didn't know. She still checked something, skillfully forged documents. "Lenia," she whispered now, addressing the photograph on the dressing table. "Tell me I'm afraid for nothing. Tell me she's good." The photograph was silent. Leonid in it smiled, large, confident, in that very shirt she had given him for their 20th wedding anniversary, when they went to Japan and he joked that he'd learn to eat with chopsticks or die of hunger. "Look people in the eyes, don't listen to their words," he always said. And Zinaida Stepanovna looked into Milena's eyes for 2 years, saw calculation there, the cold work of the mind behind the facade of charm. But each time she looked away. The first crunch of gravel on the driveway pulled her out of her thoughts. She glanced at the clock. Timofey arrived 20 minutes early. In the 15 years that Timofey Lukin had served the family, he had never violated the schedule without a good reason. He drove Leonid to his last business meeting in life, then no one knew it was the last. He held Zinaida Stepanovna's hand at the funeral when Bogdan couldn't, barely standing, leaning against the cemetery fence. Timofey was not just a driver, he was part of the family, a silent witness to their joys and sorrows, that invisible rod you could lean on without fear of it bending. Zinaida Stepanovna threw a light jacket over her house dress and went out to the porch, squinting from the sun that was finally breaking through the fog. The black sedan stood at the gate, and Timofey was already walking toward her with a quick, nervous step completely uncharacteristic of him. That alone was enough for the anxiety in Zinaida Stepanovna's chest to turn into an icy lump. His face, usually impenetrable like that of a man who had seen enough not to be surprised by anything, expressed something between fear and determination, and the wrinkles on his forehead seemed deeper than usual. "Zinaida Stepanovna," he said quietly, almost in a whisper, though there was no one around. Only sparrows in the lilac bushes and a lazy neighbor's cat warming itself on the fence. "You need to get in the car right now, on the back seat, and cover yourself with the blanket." "Timofey, what is this?" "Please," he interrupted her, and it was so unlike the always correct Timofey that Zinaida Stepanovna cut off mid-sentence. "I promised Leonid Markovitch before his very death, in the hospital when the doctors still hoped. I promised I'd protect you and Bogdan at any cost. You need to see something with your own eyes, otherwise, you won't believe. No one will believe." Her husband's name sounded like a password, like a key to a door Zinaida Stepanovna didn't want to open but knew she had to. She looked at Timofey. There was no shadow of doubt in his eyes, only a heavy, built certainty of a man who knows more than he wants to know and carries that knowledge like an unbearable burden. "What's happening?" Her voice broke half a tone, and she hated herself for that weakness. "Not here, not now. Get in. Bogdan will arrive soon. He'll take the car to pick up Milena. She asked him to come for her personally, wants to arrive at the registry together with the groom. You'll be on the back seat under the blanket. You'll hear everything you need to hear and see." Zinaida Stepanovna wanted to object. This is madness. She is the mother of the groom in 4 hours, the ceremony in Pokrovsky Cathedral, the banquet in Golden Horn for 200 guests, 5 million rubles invested in this day, florists already decorating the hall, cooks preparing salmon and venison, guests ironing dress suits. But something in Timofey's face, in his tense shoulders, in how he pronounced Leonid's name with the intonation of a man bound by true loyalty, made her nod silently. She climbed into the back seat, awkwardly tucking the jacket's hems, catching on the headrest, feeling ridiculous and terrified at the same time, and lay down, pulling her knees to her chest like she did in childhood when hiding from thunderstorms. Timofey covered her with the blanket, that same checkered blanket Leonid always took on long trips to Kasan when they went fishing with Bogdan. The fabric faintly smelled of his cologne, or it seemed so because she wanted it to. Zinaida Stepanovna bit her lip not to cry. "Lie quietly." Timofey closed the door. "So they don't hear. Be silent." The waiting dragged on endlessly, minute by minute, each seeming like an hour. She heard Timofey walking around the car checking something, the chirping of sparrows in the lilac bushes by the fence, a ferry hooting somewhere far in the port. Ordinary sounds of an ordinary Vladivostok morning that should have been the happiest day in her son's life. The blanket itched her back, the seat fold dug in, and Zinaida Stepanovna thought about her dress carelessly thrown on the bed in the bedroom, which must have wrinkled already, a silly thought, out of place, but it was what she clung to not to think about the main thing. Then the front door of the house slammed, quick and energetic steps were heard, steps of a young man on his wedding day, steps of someone hurrying to happiness or to what he takes for happiness. "Bogdan." "Timofey Fyodorovitch, good morning. Mom hasn't come down yet." Zinaida Stepanovna decided to go separately with a friend. Timofey's voice sounded calm, without the slightest hitch, with that imperturbability he had honed for 15 years. "She asked to convey that you'll meet at the temple." "Well, strange, of course. She wanted to go together." "Oh well. Then I'll drive myself. Milena asked me to pick her up. She wants us to arrive at the registry together. Romantic, you know." Zinaida Stepanovna under the blanket sank even deeper into the seat, trying not to move, not to breathe too loudly. The car rocked when Bogdan sat in the driver's seat, the door slammed, the engine purred. They set off. For a few minutes, Bogdan drove silently, only tapping his fingers on the steering wheel, a nervous habit from childhood that Zinaida Stepanovna had tried unsuccessfully to eradicate when he was 12. Then a call rang, and he turned on speakerphone. "Milena, darling, I'm on my way. I'll be there in 20 minutes, maybe a bit more. Traffic on Svetlanskaya." "Excellent." The bride's voice was soft, purring, the voice of a woman who knows she's loved. But Zinaida Stepanovna, who had heard this voice for 2 years, caught something new in it. A taut string of expectation, barely noticeable tension. "Wait for me at the entrance to Second Rechka, near the shopping center, and I'll come out to you myself." Why not come up? "I'd help with things. The apartment is rented after preparations. It's a mess. I want you to see me already ready, like a bride from a magazine." She laughed, and that laugh sounded almost sincere. "After today, everything will change." Finally. Finally. That word scratched Zinaida Stepanovna inside like a shard of glass you don't expect to cut yourself on. Not finally we'll be together, tender, in love, as brides say on the eve of the wedding. But finally, tired, like the sigh of someone who has completed a long, exhausting job, like the relief of a marathon runner crossing the finish line. "Where's your mom?" Milena asked, and in that question, there was something wrong too, some wariness, as if the answer mattered. "She's going separately with a friend." A short pause, almost imperceptible, but Zinaida Stepanovna counted the seconds. "That's good." Zinaida Stepanovna covered her mouth with her hand, feeling her fingers tremble. "That's good." What bride would say that about her mother-in-law on the wedding day? What loving woman would rejoice that the groom's mother would be far away, not nearby, unable to observe? Bogdan hung up and drove silently for a few minutes. Then he muttered to himself so quietly that she barely heard. "Everything will be fine. Today everything will be fine." Ordinary words of a groom nervous before the wedding. But Zinaida Stepanovna, lying under the blanket in the dark, heard something else in them, not joyful anticipation, but rather an incantation of someone trying to convince himself. The car turned onto the bridge, and the morning sun, finally breaking through the fog, flooded the interior with golden light. Under the checkered blanket smelling of her dead husband's cologne, Zinaida Stepanovna lay motionless, afraid to breathe, afraid to move, and felt scattered puzzle pieces coming together in her head. Milena's gaze 2 years ago, her questions about the business structure, the word finally, unwillingness to let Bogdan into the apartment, joy at the mother-in-law's absence. The intuition she had diligently suppressed all this time, convincing herself it was just jealousy, that she was just afraid to let go of her son, now screamed so loudly it drowned out the engine's hum and the wind noise outside the window. The car turned off the bridge and rolled towards Second Rechka. Bogdan stopped near the shopping center as Milena had asked, turned off the engine, and waited, drumming his fingers on the wheel. A quiet knock on the rear window. Zinaida Stepanovna flinched but recognized the conditional signal. Timofey. He was following in another car, as agreed. "I'll wait for her here," Bogdan said to himself and got out to stretch his legs. As soon as he walked away to the showcase, looking at something on his phone, the rear door opened noiselessly. Timofey helped Zinaida Stepanovna out. "Let's go," he said quietly, almost without parting his lips. "Her house is 2 blocks from here. You need to see where she really comes out from." They quickly crossed the courtyard and ended up at the entrance of an ordinary panel 9-story building with dilapidated balconies. Instead of the mansions on Gershel to which Zinaida Stepanovna was accustomed, here stretched courtyards with rusty swings and laundry on lines. Instead of the sea breeze, the air hung with a heavy smell of fuel oil from the nearby port. Zinaida Stepanovna looked at the mailboxes through the dirty glass of the door. Grafova, apartment 47, a surname she had never heard, an apartment whose existence she hadn't suspected. "She'll come out through the back entrance now." Timofey nodded toward the corner of the house. "From that side." "Let's go." They went around the building, and Zinaida Stepanovna pressed against the corner, feeling the rough concrete catch on the jacket's fabric. The first-floor windows were very close. The curtains were drawn not tightly, and through the gap, an ordinary room was visible with a sofa, children's toys on the floor, a TV in the corner. Then the back door creaked, and Zinaida Stepanovna saw Milena, not the Milena she had known for 2 years, but a completely different woman in faded jeans and a stretched sweater, with hair carelessly gathered in a ponytail, without that elegance she showed at family dinners. "Mom." A girl about 5 years old, blonde, in a pink dress with ruffles, ran out the door and clung to Milena's legs. "Mom, you're leaving." "Not for long." Bunny. Milena squatted, hugged her daughter, and in her voice was a tenderness Zinaida Stepanovna had never heard before. Real, not acted. Dad will be with you. A thin man with dark circles under his eyes, in a wrinkled shirt, came out the door. Ruslan Grafov, as Zinaida Stepanovna understood, the civil husband, the real man in her life. Milena, maybe it's not too late yet, he said quietly, looking around. Bogdan is a normal guy he doesn't deserve. Ruslan, we've already discussed this. Milena straightened up, her face instantly changed, became hard, businesslike. Morozov needs the money by Monday. Do you want him to do what he promised? Do you want them to take Kira? No, but... Then don't start. The restaurants, the logistics, the warehouses, the real estate, that'll be more than enough. A year of marriage, a clean divorce, and we'll disappear. New documents, a new city. Kira will be safe. She stepped toward Ruslan and kissed him, not like she kissed Bogdan in public, formally, for show, but deeply, with the intimacy that only exists between people who have lived together for years, sharing a bed and fears, raising a common child. Zinaida Stepanovna watched a stranger's lips touched her future daughter-in-law's lips and felt something breaking inside. Not with a crack, but slowly, with a creak, like an old tree under the weight of snow. Kiryusha, kiss Dad. Milena pushed her daughter toward Ruslan. And go home. I'll be back in the evening. She disappeared into the back entrance. A few minutes later, Zinaida Stepanovna saw the same woman, now different, transformed in an elegant dress, with a radiant smile and graceful gait, coming out the front entrance, walking toward the shopping center where the unsuspecting Bogdan waited. We'll go in my car, dear. Her voice rang with joy. I want us to arrive at the temple together. Bogdan smiled with that very boyish smile Zinaida Stepanovna loved so much and opened the door for her, not suspecting that a minute ago this woman had kissed another man and called him the father of a child. When their car disappeared around the corner, Zinaida Stepanovna turned to Timofey. Her voice sounded hoarse, unfamiliar to her. I need to talk to him, to this Ruslan. Ruslan opened the door immediately, as if waiting, or maybe he really was waiting, because upon seeing the engagement photo that Zinaida Stepanovna took out of her bag, his face turned grey, and he stepped back into the apartment, letting her in. In the corner of the room, Kira was building a tower of blocks, humming something about princesses, and that childish voice against the background of what Zinaida Stepanovna was about to hear seemed like a cruel mockery of fate. You're Bogdan's mother. It wasn't a question. She talked about you, said you were the main threat, that you could ruin everything. Tell me. Zinaida Stepanovna sat on the edge of the sofa, clasping her fingers on her knees until it hurt. Everything from the beginning. And Ruslan told, stumbling, jumping from one thing to another, sometimes falling silent to glance at his daughter. 4 years together they never got married, always put it off. Premature birth, 2 months in intensive care, bills for paid procedures, his layoff from work at the port, failed investments as a last attempt to get out, loan from Morozov, that same Gleb Kirillovich who holds second Rechka, has people in the authorities. 10 million turned into 18, threat to fabricate a case for the orphanage, take Kira, hand her over to the right people. She studied your family for 6 months before meeting Bogdan. Ruslan spoke looking at the floor. Restaurants, warehouses, ownership structure. Knew your husband died, that the son was lonely and vulnerable. Called him, he choked, the ideal target. Documents. Zinaida Stepanovna heard her own voice from the side, icy, unfamiliar. Do you have proof? Ruslan silently got up, took a folder from the closet, and placed it before her on the coffee table. Kira's birth certificate with both parents' names. Registration certificate. Milena registered in this apartment 3 years. Family photos. Milena, Ruslan, and little Kira against the sea, on a playground, at a holiday table. Printouts of messenger correspondence where Milena discussed the plan with someone, calling Bogdan a grieving idiot who walks into the noose himself. Screenshots of search queries. Lodyanov Leonid Vladivostok Fortune Restaurants Pacific owner Bogdan Lodyanov Charity. Zinaida Stepanovna flipped through the pages, and each was a blow, methodical, calculated, ruthless. Her family was prey, her son a means, her grief an instrument. I didn't want to. Ruslan looked at his daughter, and there were tears in his eyes. Bogdan is a good person, but Kira, you understand, I couldn't. I understand. Zinaida Stepanovna slammed the folder shut and stood up. Come to Pokrovsky Cathedral in an hour, with your daughter, with the original documents. They'll deal with Morozov. She turned to Timofey standing at the door. The Loginovs have connections too. You'll get protection, but I need you there. Bogdan must see. Pokrovsky Cathedral shone in the midday sun. White walls, blue domes, golden crosses reaching into the cloudless July sky. The fog had long dissipated, and Vladivostok lay below like the palm of a hand, sparkling with bays and bridges. Guests gathered at the entrance, business partners in expensive suits, partners' wives in hats and pearls, Bogdan's friends, restaurant business representatives. Zinaida Stepanovna walked past them, accepting congratulations, hugging acquaintances, smiling so wide her cheeks hurt. Zinaida Stepanovna, what a wonderful day. Bogdan must be happy. Yes, she nodded. Very happy. Yuri Vishnikov, the best man, led her to the preparation room where Bogdan stood in front of the mirror, adjusting his tie for the 100th time. Seeing his mother, he turned, and Zinaida Stepanovna felt a lump in her throat. Mom, how do I look? Perfect, son. I'm so nervous. He laughed, rubbing his palms. Imagine, hands cold as a corpse's. Dad would probably say something wise to calm me. Bogdan. Zinaida Stepanovna stepped toward him. I need to tell you something. It's important. Mom, not now. He brushed it off, smiling. In an hour, I'm getting married. Whatever it is, it'll wait till tomorrow or the day after. We have a honeymoon. She looked at him, at her boy who so desperately wanted to be happy that he didn't notice the obvious, and understood that he wouldn't believe words. He needed a child's eyes, a man's voice, documents with stamps. Fine. She approached and fixed his tie as she used to for her husband before important meetings. Just remember, whatever happens today, I love you, and everything I do is to protect you. Mom, what's with you? He frowned. You're acting strange. Just worried about you. Leaving the room, she passed the door where the bride was preparing and heard Milena's voice, quiet, harsh, completely unlike the one she used with Bogdan. After the ceremony, it's all over. He won't know anything until it's too late. The money will be transferred on Monday. Zinaida Stepanovna froze for a second, then went on to her place in the first row, where she had stood 30 years ago at her own wedding next to Leonid, not yet knowing how much happiness and grief they would share. The church choir sang, and 200 guests turned to the doors. Candles burned with golden fire, incense smoked from the altar, sunlight fell through stained glass in colored spots on the stone floor. The doors swung open, and Milena appeared, led in a white dress for 200,000 rubles, veil falling to the floor, bouquet of white peonies in her hands. Guests whispered in admiration, someone even clapped, violating church etiquette. Bogdan at the altar pressed his hand to his chest, and tears ran down his cheeks, tears of happiness, gratitude, relief. Zinaida Stepanovna watched as Milena floated down the aisle, nodding to guests, exuding love and grace, and saw what no one saw. Calculation behind every gesture, lie behind every smile, cold mind work behind the facade of tenderness. She noticed how the bride's fingers squeezed Bogdan's hand harder than necessary for a moment, a fleeting sign of tension, the first crack in the rehearsed mask. Out of the corner of her eye, she saw Timofey at the side entrance. He nodded barely noticeably, confirming readiness. In the back corner, behind a massive column, stood Ruslan with Kira in his arms, and the girl twisted her head, looking at the golden domes and burning candles. Milena stood next to Bogdan at the altar, and the priest opened the prayer book. The choir fell silent. In the ensuing silence, the crackling of candles was heard, and somewhere behind the cathedral walls, the city hummed, living its ordinary life, unsuspecting of the drama about to unfold under these ancient vaults. All figures took their places, all threads wove into one knot, and Zinaida Stepanovna, clutching the folder with documents in her bag, waited for the moment when this knot would tighten finally or be cut forever. Father Pavel, a dignified priest with a bushy beard, opened the Trebniki and began reading prayers before the laying of crowns. His voice, accustomed to these words spoken hundreds of times, resounded under the cathedral vaults solemnly and peacefully. The choir responded, candles burned, sun fell through stained glass on the bride's white dress, and everything looked just as a happy wedding should. Beautiful, blessed, right. Zinaida Stepanovna stood in the first row, feeling the weight of the folder in her bag, and waited. Before performing the sacrament, Father Pavel raised his eyes from the book. According to ancient tradition, I ask if there are any impediments to this marriage. Does anyone know a reason why these two cannot be joined? Silence. Bogdan smiled, looking at Milena. Milena slightly relaxed her shoulders, barely noticeable, but Zinaida Stepanovna saw it. Her lips touched with a shadow of relief. There are impediments. Zinaida Stepanovna's voice sounded quiet, but in the temple's acoustics, it carried to the farthest corners. She stepped forward, out of the row of guests, and 200 pairs of eyes turned to her, astonished, puzzled, shocked. Mom. Bogdan frowned. What are you? This woman lives with another man. Zinaida Stepanovna approached the altar, ignoring the whispers behind her. Her real surname is Grafova. She took it 4 years ago when she moved in with Ruslan Grafov on 2nd Rechka. They have a common 5-year-old daughter, Kira, and this whole wedding is part of a fraudulent scheme to gain access to our family's money. The temple exploded not with shouts but with that special hum that arises when hundreds of people gasp, "Oh," and start whispering at once. Bogdan stepped back a step, his face lost all expression, becoming the mask of a person not understanding the language spoken to him. It's a lie. Milena raised her chin, and something sharp, predatory flashed in her eyes. Bogdan, your mother never accepted me. She's making it up, she's jealous, she doesn't want to let you go. Bogdan, listen to me. Zinaida Stepanovna didn't raise her voice, but each word fell heavily, weightily. Her man's name is Ruslan. The daughter is Kira. They owe money to a man named Gleb Kirillovich Morozov. He's a local monolender who holds the whole district. Bogdan stood motionless, and from his face, Zinaida Stepanovna saw everything he believed crumbling. Not anger, not outrage, bewilderment of someone told the ground under his feet was an illusion. Mom, you can't. He stammered, gasping for air. Say it's a mistake. Say you were wrong. I wasn't wrong, son. She's lying. Milena grabbed Bogdan by the hand. Darling, look at me. You know me, you love me. Could I possibly? But she didn't finish because down the central aisle between rows of stunned guests walked a man with a little girl by the hand. Thin, with sunken cheeks, in a cheap suit bought clearly for some other occasion. Kira twisted her head, looking at golden icons and burning candles. Her light curls bounced with each step. Mom. The girl saw Milena and broke free from her father's hand, running to the altar with that directness only children have. Mom, you're so beautiful, like a princess in a fairy tale. Milena froze, and Zinaida Stepanovna saw the mask finally crack, not at the edges but right in the middle, splitting in two. The white dress, veil, peony bouquet, all suddenly became scenery for someone else's play, a costume on the wrong actress. I am Ruslan Grafov. The man stopped at the altar. His voice sounded dull, broken. Milena and I have lived together for 4 years. We have a common child. Here's Kira's birth certificate. I'm listed as father, Milena as mother. Here's the registration certificate at one address. Here our joint photos over 4 years. He extended the documents to Father Pavel, and the priest took them mechanically, confusedly looking at the papers. No. Bogdan shook his head, stepping back another step. No, this can't be. Milena, tell them. Say it's some mistake, that this man is lying. That. He turned to her, and in his eyes was a plea, desperate, childish plea of someone ready to believe anything just not to acknowledge the obvious. Milena was silent. Her lips were parted, but no sound came out, and that silence, heavy, viscous, endless, was more eloquent than any words. She studied your family for 6 months, Ruslan continued, and each word struck Bogdan point blank. Knew about your father's death, your loneliness. Called you the ideal target, grieving, lonely, desperately needing closeness. The meeting at the charity auction was planned. Every word of hers was part of the script. Shut up. Bogdan whispered so quietly only those nearby heard. Shut up, you hear? Shut up. Milena suddenly dropped to her knees right at the altar, and the white dress spread around her like a puddle of silk and lace. Tears streamed down her cheeks, smearing desperate makeup, and she spoke quickly, stumbling, choking on words. I didn't want to. You don't understand. No one understands. Morozov threatened to take Kira, fabricate a case for the orphanage. He has people everywhere, in police, in authorities. We owed 18 million, and it started with 10, interest every month. I saw no other way. Understand, what kind of mother would I be if I didn't do everything possible for my daughter? You chose to destroy someone else's family to save yours. Zinaida Stepanovna's voice was cold. That's not motherhood, that's crime. You don't know what it's like. Milena raised her head. You with your restaurants, your millions. You don't know what it's like not to sleep nights because you fear tomorrow they'll come and take your child. Bogdan stood motionless, looking at the woman he had loved for 2 years, who made him breathe again after his father's death, who, as it seemed to him, returned meaning to his life. Then he asked, his voice terrible in its emptiness, "Did you love me at least a little? Was anything real?" Milena raised her eyes to him, and Zinaida Stepanovna saw her straining to say something, her lips moving but no sound. 5 seconds, 10, 15, a whole eternity of silence in which 2 years drowned, a 5 million wedding, and all her son's dreams of happiness. No. Bogdan nodded to himself. I understand. At the temple exit, uniformed people already waited, 2 men who had stayed aside during the ceremony. When Milena was led out to the porch, one pronounced the detention formula, and handcuffs clicked on her wrists over white lace gloves. Some guests filmed on phones, some turned away, unable to watch. Gleb Morozov was detained attempting to approach the cathedral, Timofey said, appearing next to Zinaida Stepanovna. Extortion, threat, that's for a long time. The temple emptied slowly, reluctantly. Guests dispersed quietly whispering, casting glances at Bogdan who still sat on the first-row bench, hugging his head with his hands. Father Pavel discreetly retreated to the altar. Zinaida Stepanovna sat next to her son, not touching him, just next to him. How long have you known? He asked finally, without raising his head. Since this morning. Timofey found out earlier but was gathering evidence. Why didn't you say? I tried, son. In the preparation room, remember? You brushed it off, said everything would wait till tomorrow. Bogdan laughed shortly, bitterly, without a trace of mirth. I wouldn't have believed. I'd have defended her. I'd have chosen her, not you. I know. He raised his head and looked at his mother, red eyes, haggard face. Zinaida Stepanovna saw in him the little boy who ran to her during thunderstorms and the adult man whose life had just been shattered. I feel like a fool, he said. A complete idiot who was led around the finger. Wanting to believe in love isn't foolishness. She was a deceiver, Bogdan. She forged documents we checked. She played a role for 2 years. Anyone would have believed. Dad wouldn't have believed. He'd have seen through her immediately. Zinaida Stepanovna was silent, recalling her husband, his insight, his flair for people, his ability to see truth behind words. I don't know, she said honestly. Love makes even the smartest vulnerable. Your father loved you more than anything in the world. He wanted you to be happy. Perhaps that desire would have blinded him. Bogdan buried his face in his palms, his shoulders shook. Zinaida Stepanovna placed her hand on his back, just placed it, not stroking, not consoling, just letting him know she was there. I miss him so much. Bogdan's sob was dull, choked. I thought Milena filled that void. She only made it bigger. Your father said, protect those you love even if it causes them pain, because losing them is much more painful. They sat in the empty temple until the sun shifted and colored spots from stained glass crawled from benches to the stone floor. Then Bogdan stood, straightened his shoulders slowly, with effort, as those who have gone through fire and survived hold themselves, and extended his hand to his mother. Let's go home. 3 months later, Bogdan entered the office on Gershel with a folder of reports under his arm, and Zinaida Stepanovna, tearing herself from papers, noted the changes. He held himself straighter, something new appeared in his eyes, like the calm of someone wounded but not broken. Warehouse reports. He placed the folder on the table. Uncle Tima asked to convey that the containers will arrive on Thursday. Uncle Tima. Zinaida Stepanovna smiled to herself. That address appeared a month ago, and Timofey, hearing it first, turned to the window, suspiciously long gazing at the bay, then for a whole week walked with a face as if awarded an order and simultaneously given 10 years' pension. Yesterday he tried to teach me to check oil in the car, added Bogdan. 40 minutes explaining. I'm an economist engineer, Mom. I know where the dipstick is. Timofey Fyodorovich thinks a real man must understand technology. A real man must know a good auto services phone. But I won't tell him that. Zinaida Stepanovna nodded. Milena got 4 years in a general regime colony for large-scale fraud and document forgery. Morozov got 6 years for extortion. Ruslan got sole custody of Kira. Zinaida Stepanovna paid his lawyer and court costs. You know, Bogdan approached the window overlooking Goldenhorn Bay. I don't hate her. I only pity her. She destroyed everything and got nothing. No money, no freedom, no daughter nearby. Akira. Ruslan sends photos. She still asks about the kind aunt from the church. And you. Zinaida Stepanovna looked away. A 5-year-old girl left without her mother for 4 years, but alive, healthy, safe from Morozov's people. The bittersweet outcome of this story, like almost all in life. Dad would be proud of you, she said. Of how you're coping. Bogdan turned, and in his smile was sadness but not hopelessness, the sadness of someone who learned to live with loss without letting it destroy him. He'd be proud of you, Mom, for that morning, for what you did. The sun flooded the office reflections played on the bay's water, and somewhere below the port hummed. Containers, cranes, ships, life that continues despite everything. Zinaida Stepanovna looked at her son and thought of Leonid, of his words that truth is always better than lies.